Hello,
Hello,
we're
here's
back
Shabazz.
again.
Here's
Sorry,
Shabazz.
everyone. Yeah, and he's Pete Marshall,
And with that impeccable introduction.
the dickheads that we are.
So yeah, we have a guest today.
Yeah,
We have Shelly, don't we?
yeah.
You want to
And
introduce
we'll
yourself?
let her introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here. I'm Shelly Baer, and I'm the director of the Bold Beauty Project, Inc. In Miami, Florida. And I also work at the University of Miami School of Medicine as a director of leadership training initiatives focusing on people with disabilities.
So
Okay.
we heard about you through one of your articles, didn't we? So that was a very specific story, which I think led to the creation of the Bold Beauty Project. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, sure. The Bold Beauty Project is an innovative visual arts exhibition using photography to showcase women with disabilities, beauty, sensuality, and empowerment. We began back many, many years ago, and it evolved. And I have a physical disability myself. I have juvenile rheumatoid arthritis with that, is visible, and many deformities in my hands and my legs. And it propelled me to get involved with this photography exhibition. And it snowballed, and we had such success in Miami back when we first did the show. And I was one of the models. I was asked to be one of the models for this innovative show. And I never in a million years would have thought of being a model for this kind of show. And I was one of 3 that posed semi-nude. And it was women with all different types of physical, sensory disabilities. And I was one of 3 that was open to posing nude, really letting it all out and really jumping into this experience. And it changed my life. It really transformed how I see myself as beautiful. And I was 42 when I did this, and I was, better. I was, definitely feeling more comfortable in my own skin, but I still had a lot of insecurities. And I didn't really look in a full-length mirror until my 30s. And I think this pushed me further in my self-acceptance. And we had all the images displayed in a gallery in Miami. And the opening reception, there were over 500 people that came to see the show. It's a fundraising event for the Center for Independent Living here in Miami. And I was on the board at that time. So it kind of really shifted how I saw myself. And I think that was what the article that you saw, that you read, was how my experience of what that was like for me, posing semi-nude. I don't know if I answered your questions about the project.
Yeah, but I'm just curious to know, because you say you were on the board at the time. Did you feel like you had to lead by example?
Yes, I think that was part of it too. Growing up, I never saw images, women with disabilities in the media, in all the magazines. I devoured 17 magazine. Never saw women that looked like me in the media, with the deformities of the hands and, walking with a limp and that kind of thing. So I think part of the impetus of doing this kind of project was to create role models. So younger girls who have any kind of disability, invisible or visible, could see women, being out there, being bold and leaders in their community. And I think that was part of it too. And so I couldn't let this project go, because I thought it's such like having women as role models for younger girls. I kind of wished I had something like this. As a teenager, I got arthritis when I was 3 years old. It might have saved me years of therapy, having, not obviously the nudity angle, as a kid, but the photography. And now things have changed, with Instagram and all the social media for kids girls with disabilities, and boys too, I think.
Well, you say that, but do you, in your experience, do you think things have changed with social media, or do you think they've just got worse?
That's a good question, Shabazz. I think it's pro and con. I think there's definitely positives for it now, and I think that you've seen so many shifts and more visibility of just people in general with disabilities in social media and in media and Broadway shows.
Yeah.
But I think it creates negativity too, because everything's so immediate. And with my disability specifically, I once was doing I do public speaking now, and I was talking to the Arthritis Foundation to teenagers and young people with arthritis. And they were saying with arthritis, you take a lot of medication and there's a lot of side effects. So she was on Facebook, and her face was chubby, and her friends didn't tag her because they didn't recognize her. And she was humiliated. I mean, she was so upset and devastated like that because she didn't really fit in on Facebook or social media. I didn't go through that, right? So I think it's changed. It's changed for girls and boys with disabilities. So it was really interesting. I didn't really know what to say. Of course, I'm a social worker as my background. I had empathy, but that's different that they're facing, in today's world.
I mean, so a question here is, how did you plan the entire thing? What discussions did you have before that with the photographer, and how did he think about it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think part of this project is it's a collaboration. So all the models who were assigned their photographer, we made it very clear, the leadership of this program, that it's a collaboration between the model and the photographer. And many of the photographers were not used to working with women with disabilities. So we kind of looked at it as like a threefold mission. So a transformational experience for the woman and for the photographer and for the audience that came to see the show. But I think that kind of dialogue, and the photographer was open. Our photographer, my photographer, also had an illness, and I think he was more sensitive to the barriers and the myths and the stereotypes around disability. So he was so sensitive and kind and accepting, and it was a collaboration with him. We had pre-meetings, so before the day of the photo shoot, we got to meet with him in person, and I shared my ideas. He had some ideas too. So if that was going to be okay, so that was fantastic. That it was such a collaboration. I devoured magazines, and I talked to friends about how I see myself as beautiful, whatever that means to the woman. And I had in my mind that I wanted to be semi-nude. And, I thought people stare at me anyway. I'm noticeable. So why not have them stare at a beautiful image? It took a lot of courage for me to do that, to shed as we went through the day. More clothes kept coming off. And my friend went first. She has MS and she's in a wheelchair, and she was a model in her former days. So it seemed very easy for her. She did really totally full frontal nudity. I didn't do that. But I was, it was kind of an unfolding of feeling more comfortable being that vulnerable. And I had some alcohol, so that helped a little bit with, and music was playing, and the photographer really helped to make it a comfortable environment for both Anne and myself for that whole day. And it was so encouraging too. And it kind of got you like thinking, not so much focusing on yourself and just having fun, really.
Yeah.
And I got to see how hard it is for models. It's not so simple.
Yeah, it makes me think, like, I know this is a hard question, but makes me wonder about what if you weren't so lucky and you didn't have an understanding photographer, how much more difficult that experience would have been. You know, that it just makes me think of that really. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, it seems like you were lucky in that in that instant that you had a photographer who was aware of the issues and stuff
Yes.
like that. And if
Yeah.
maybe if things would have been different, you would have had a different photographer who wasn't aware of stuff like that and
Yeah.
how
That's a good
that,
point.
how
Yeah,
that
we had when we selected the photographers, we always requested that they meet with their model first
yeah
in person, or now through Zoom or
yeah
whatever, so they get to know each other.
yeah. And how do you think? Could I? How do you think the calendar changed your relationship with your own body?
Mm, that's a good point. I think seeing those images, after they were all, developed, and the photographer, picked his top three that he liked the best that were going to be in the show, because we were in a gallery. They were large, almost billboard size images, because we wanted it to be like bold, and when I got to see those images developed, and one I didn't like, the black and white one of me, like the Rubenesque, like lying on the couch, whatever I forgot what name of that couch is, the Barcelona bed. I'm like, I don't like that. I don't like that one because I looked fat, So,
Yeah,
but the photographer was insistent on that one is a very artistic image,
yeah,
and that should be in the show. And then I got more comfortable with it. But I think that was a process too, Shabazz, like kind of seeing all the images and afterwards, and it was kind of done. And I think I said, oh I like how I look, I like these parts of me, and I'm pretty, I kind of shifted my self-esteem. I think it
yeah.
really did shift it on a different level than prior to having this photo shoot experience. It's hard to put into words.
You talk about your dad in the article, and that just made me think about your photo shoot and the relationship between that and your family. Did I know it changed your view of yourself, but did
Yeah.
it change your family's view of you?
Did they come to the show?
Yes, they did. Yeah, they all came to the show, and they were so supportive, and I think they were blown away as well of the final selections of the images. And I think in the beginning, they didn't like the nudity part.
Yeah,
Yeah, they did not. They were a little shocked. But I kind of am always, I like to take risks, and they know that about me.
yeah,
So they go, once again, what is Shelly doing now?
yeah,
So I gone skiing. They didn't like when I did that, adaptive skiing. So they kind of know that about me. But it's interesting because a lot of the family friends came to the show. So I grew up with them. So I think that was a little surprising too. Like having all my family friends come and see me all bold and open, but we all have bodies, right? And
Yeah.
this is part of our human experience, and
yeah,
it's artistic. So it's using art. That's what Bold Beauty is about, the use of art to create social change around
yeah.
disability. And we're
But
selecting photography.
but the idea of disability and your family people's families' perception of them as disabled people, when that collides with humanity, it, it creates a weird blend. You know, it creates a kind
Yeah.
of confusion in the family member's mind. Like, I I see this person, okay, they're ex person, but they're a disabled person. So they're
Yeah.
a person, but they're not. They're a different kind of person. You know.
Yeah.
You know. So
Yeah.
modeling to me and to lots of other people is seen as a mainstream thing, something that a disabled person can't do, and something that if a disabled person does do it, it's out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's bizarre, and
Yeah.
it really shouldn't be that. You know.
No.
And do you think that's changing over time? Because you're
Yes.
still doing the project.
Yes, because we started this in 2006. So
Okay.
back when we did that, when I, posed nude, there was nothing like that. There was nothing like this. I did so many searches to try to find something similar. I probably even looked in the UK. You guys might have been ahead of the time with
Yeah.
this kind of show or photography, um, but I didn't see it at all.
Yeah.
So we were kind of like cutting edge back then. And that's why it was so successful and we couldn't let it go. The committee that founded this project. And now I think it's totally opened up. I think we see so many more representations now of disability and beauty and sexuality, sensuality, Crip Camp, and all the different movements that are happening around disability is important.
How much support do you think you've had from other groups, from kind of mainstream photographers, from mainstream magazines, maybe?
Well, that's interesting. We got a lot of press coverage. If that's what you mean, like in the Miami Herald and the New Times. And now we came back and did it again, the 10-year anniversary in 2016, and back in Miami. So we once again got more press. When we did it, we were on local TV here. So I think we did get a lot of support from the media. We've replicated it now into 5 cities across the United States: Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Texas, and Panama. So it's a replication model. So we hope to keep replicating it in other cities and even internationally, if any, so I wanted as many women as possible to have this experience. That's why I couldn't let it go, after when I did it originally, because it shifted my life and my relationship to my body. And I really wanted many women to have this experience. And all the cities that we've gone thus far, they all agree. A lot of the women say it was so amazing, it was so transformational. They loved working with their photographer. They had a good match, most of them. We really do try to find photographers that are open to this, working with disability.
Yeah.
And we do some coaching with them to help them understand what it's like. So I think it's been really successful, and we keep hoping it will grow and expand.
Yeah. And how often do you do it then? You say
That's
it's in
good.
other places, but how often is it annually or
Yes.
what is
When we go into a city, we wanted it to be of the city, of the community. So
yeah.
it takes about a year to pull this off because you need a team to do it. And we act as we provide technical assistance. We are a nonprofit. We incorporated in 2016, and we do have some funds, but not a lot. We try to help as much as we can, but we like it to be of the city. So we need a model coordinator, somebody that knows that city's disability community really well. And we have a whole criteria. We have a whole package of how to do it. And you need a photographer coordinator. So somebody that is a photographer in that city. So then they can recruit photographers. It's all volunteer. So the photographers, you know, don't get paid, and they have to be open to doing this. So actually we hope, like, I know Washington, D.C. wants to do another 5-year celebration. They were in 2015. Everything got sidetracked because of, you know, COVID-19. So right now we're on hold as far as, you know, replicating in another city, because it's just not feasible right now.
Yeah.
As you guys know.
Yeah. We know only too well. Is there anything you want to ask Pete before I say something else?
Did I get everything that you guys were interested in learning?
No,
the only thing.
I'm just asking Pete before I ask another question, whether he wants to ask anything.
The only thing I would like to ask is what. Again, I don't know if this is kind of you talked about it in the article, kind of. No.
Yeah, I just wanted to know about how your experience has informed your future work.
And you mean having that experience?
Yeah, you know, with all the other work that you do, and like, you know, in all your other professional settings, how that you think how that has informed your own practice.
I think it's a good question. It's all connected, because it's all about visibility, right?
Yeah.
And this is an arts project. We're using photography specifically, and it's about visibility of women. We're focusing on women. Sorry, you guys. I don't know. So sorry.
It's all right, carry on.
Okay.
That's not a fire alarm, is it?
It's a doorbell. I live in an apartment building, and I hope they're not going to like walk in right now.
Okay.
It could be the pest control thing. I'm so sorry.
But
right. They're all. I think I've learned so much from that experience too, and you know, meeting other women with all different types of disabilities, like, you know, not just physical, but we have, you know, cognitive disability. And one of our, in Philadelphia, they brought in a woman with Down syndrome. And we didn't originally think of intellectual cognitive disabilities for the show, because I didn't want it to be exploitative. You know, I wanted them to fully understand the purpose. But then they were talking about this woman in Philadelphia who had Down syndrome. And I'm like, yeah, she's perfect. Because she said the same thing I used to say. I look in magazines and I don't see anybody that looks like me in magazines. And she was a little chubby. And I said, that's it. I got it. She gets it. So we had her be one of our models. And then they also asked me about transgender women. And we had never had a transgender woman in any of our shows. I said, she has a disability, she's in. You know, it's fine. Yeah. So over the years, we've evolved, you know, our definitions of who, because we're fluid. We're fluid. Wait, you guys, I don't know what they're doing here. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry, continue.
Okay, sorry. And so it's evolved, and I think the work that my day job, you know, this is my side passion project. But my day job is all about visibility and diversity and leadership. That's what I do in my day job. It's advocacy and leadership for young adults with disabilities, high school students with and without, and it's about inclusion. And that's what Bold Beauty is about. The same kind of, intersectionality, empowerment, leadership, because the women that we select are all leaders in their own way, in their community. We want women that are not in that big victim mentality. We want women that are really doing cool stuff in the world. So
how did you end up doing that? How did you end up getting into that job?
The day job?
Yeah.
That's such a story, Shabazz.
Go on then.
I'm a clinical social worker is my background, and
social worker.
Yeah, one of those. I was just all about helping people and helping the poor and the low income, and never really wanted to work in disability. I never wanted to, I guess it was like kind of the internalized ableism, right? Like kind of helping my own self. Yeah. And that evolved. I mean, that shifted over the years. And when I was in graduate school, I was in New York, and it was just around the ADA. Yes, I'm old. But I kind of was focusing on everybody else, helping everybody else except myself. And I had to kind of look at my own stuff, my own issues, before I could help somebody else. Yeah. So that evolved, over the years. And I think being a social worker, you're just helping that one person in front of you and being really idealistic. But as the different jobs that I got over the years, and I was in a leadership program here in Miami, and it helped me see myself as a leader. Because I never thought of myself as a leader. I thought of myself, I'm a social worker. I'm helping people 1% at a time. But then this kind of reframed how I viewed myself as a leader when I was in the Miami Fellows Initiative. And
without sounding like a therapist, but it sounds remarkably similar to your modeling. You didn't see yourself as a model.
Nope. Not at all.
You ended up seeing yourself as a model.
You just became a therapist.
Yeah. So I just
No, I didn't.
I just see a link there between that and the other role. So you talk about it as a day job, but it's, to me, it's very interesting. It's like,
Yes, you're right. You're right. I didn't see myself as a model, and here I became a model for a day. And I didn't see myself as a leader, and now I'm running leadership programs.
Yeah. So
they collide. Yeah.
Yeah, and it says something about the human spirit, doesn't it? About how the human spirit can transcend its own belief, really, in a way.
Yes.
In the sense that you thought you were something, and you thought you couldn't be that something else, but you found yourself in the positions where you didn't think it was possible. It sounds like it to me.
That's exactly it. Like people, it kind of like I just jumped, right? When they asked me to be a model for a day, I said yes, and I didn't analyze it. And I'm usually not like that. I just analyze and overthink. Yeah. Same thing when I got this position where I work now to run a leadership program.
Yeah.
I thought I wasn't qualified. I mean, I'm not a teacher, I'm a social worker. They wanted me to design a curriculum for professionals around leadership and disability. Same kind of thing, Shabazz. I said yes.
Yeah.
I learned it by doing, right?
Yeah, and it goes back to what we were talking about before we were recording, because you talked about you being like this person who just does stuff, right? And you talked about going skiing.
Yeah.
Again, where you just jumped into something,
Yep.
you just go ahead and do it, and and you just experience it, and that way you find something out about yourself, right?
Yes. Yes.
And what I'm driving at here is not just for you, but I'm saying it for everybody. It's like maybe there's a lesson for us all there, you know,
Mhm.
that maybe for some people, sometimes we just have to go out there and just have a go and try something, yeah?
Yep. What do you think helps people do that?
But encouragement and
Yep.
like having the right people around you.
Yep.
And I don't mean that in a corny sense. I mean that in a sense of like, you know, having the right people giving you the right sort of encouragement.
Yep.
You can't just have any old Tom, Dick, and Harry around you
Yep.
and
Yep.
think that'll be enough. They have to be the right kind of people. And to be honest, a lot of that's down to luck as well.
I
I
think
think.
I was thinking the same thing, like having like your dream team or like the people that believe in you as well, because I
Yeah.
wasn't sure I was equipped to do the job, and they saw something in me that I didn't see in myself.
Yeah, so you have to, I think we have to have trust in other people. And like when a social worker is doing their job well, for example, the person receiving the service needs to have trust in the social worker.
Yeah.
But when you don't have trust in the social worker, you can't get the best service, I think.
True.
You know what I'm saying?
And I had also had trust in the photographer that
Yeah.
to show you know my different sides of my sensuality and my beauty.
Yeah. And but that takes a level of bravery as well. But that's what I was saying earlier about it was lucky that the photographer was prepared to engage with it and was his thought process was open enough to kind of take you on board kind of thing. Because
Yes.
if he'd never experienced disability or anything like that, it would have been a lot more difficult, like I was saying earlier, for him to kind of like get the best out of you in a way.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you would have just both been there trying to make your way through this awkward position.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's a collaboration and it's a trust, like you were saying. And that's kind of what I do as a social worker too. Like you're collaborating and you're creating the rapport and the connection and yeah.
Because I think with social work, that connection and the rapport is the one of the most important things there is. You
Yes.
know, if you don't have that connection and that rapport, it just becomes a bureaucratic exercise
Yeah.
that doesn't make any difference to anybody.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it just becomes a tick box, you know,
Yeah.
situation
Yeah, exactly.
where you don't know what else to do. And you mentioned earlier, like you have a propensity to do like outlandish things. Would you give us any more examples of some of those things?
I went to I went skiing in Colorado like
Alright.
6 months after I had hip revision surgery.
Oh,
So my parents were freaking out about that. But it's the adapted skiing, so it's a sit
yeah.
ski. So I sat in the ski and it was I loved it. It was so amazing. I went on a sailing trip for a week through Outward Bound. So I was on a sailboat for a week, and
Is
they all
that
and they all thought I was crazy.
and what is that for disabled people, or is that
Yeah,
just for...
this particular Outward Bound is a, a leadership, bonding group, team building teams. But this one, they had it in the Keys, I'm in Florida, and it was just for people with arthritis. So it was somehow through the Arthritis Foundation, I signed up because it's at like 2 hours south of me, and I love that too because I love the water. So that was another kind of crazy experience that I did in my life. I did that in my 20s. And then I went to South Africa. So I do like to travel. And that was through that leadership program that I was, alluding to earlier. They took all of us on this leadership journey across South Africa. So that was hard, for somebody with a physical disability. It was grueling. But I did have the support team there and friends to help me. I brought my wheelchair.
Could you just tell us a bit about the South Africa experience, being a disabled person going to a place such as South Africa?
I loved it. I really was blown away by the spirit of the people there. And I would love to go back one day. But I didn't see many people with disabilities there. But then again, we were going more to the touristy areas. We went to Cape Town, Johannesburg, and then we did the safari experience.
All right.
But yes, I don't remember a lot of there was accessibility issues. I mean, I think all the hotels were accessible. But I don't really remember seeing a lot of people on the streets with disabilities, at least visible.
Because I was just asking because I've never been, and that seems far remote from where we are. So I just thought, I may as well, while you're here, I may as well ask you about that, because I could live vicariously through you then.
But I think it might be better now because when then I went. But
how many years ago was that you went?
I think 2002.
All right, so quite
a while ago.
Yeah. Anything else like outlandish that you've done?
So maybe
I was just thinking about, maybe you don't have to think of anything. I was just thinking maybe you should go back to South Africa and do a calendar there, and that way you could find what the disability experience is actually like.
Exactly. I think I would love to do that. I lost touch with some of the people that I met there, but I think that would be incredible. How disability is viewed in other countries, right? And
because just for us hearing about it from the US compared to the UK, it's like it's still vastly different.
Very different.
And is there anything you would like to ask us about the disabled experience in the UK?
Yeah, what is it? I know you guys seem much more progressive over in the UK regarding disability, sexuality, right?
To be fair, I think compared to the US, honestly,
right? I think so too.
Yeah. But it's still not great,
In what ways? How isn't it great?
Because after the financial crash in 2008, there were lots of services and cut and this, that, and the other. Mm-hmm. And around the world there's a shortage of money anyway. And for example, services like social care that lots of disabled people rely on is being cut to the bone,
Because you have a good support system there for the social care, right? Or
just to say, Shabazz, in some ways, I know a little bit about the American system, and I'm not going to disagree with anything of what you said, but it is kind of white people's problems compared to the US. Honestly, I mean, honestly, whatever you think about the British benefit systems,
Yeah.
and we spent hours doing activism around it, and honestly, we could say tons about it. It's not even a speciality of mine, but honestly, I could say loads about it. But honestly, like, we have one,
You do.
a pretty decent one. Honestly, it takes some skill and some nous to navigate, but it exists. And honestly, like in the US, it's just ugh.
It's crazy here. And you understand. But I was going to ask you, what about like disability and sexuality and
I mean,
It's not that big of a. It's not that big of a topic that gets really discussed.
I mean,
That's
to
why
be
I wanted
fair,
to discuss it with you.
yeah. I mean, partly this is part of, but also I think there's a fascinating news story a couple of years ago, actually. But actually, there was a, I think it wasn't MenCap, but it was one of those like care provider organizations, and they set up a sex hotline for disabled clients.
really?
Which, on the one hand, is just like, which you can imagine the kind of news stories that got, and it was all like, oh my god, this is not what disabled, blah 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 blah. On the other hand, you could effortlessly go, that's pretty progressive. That's kind of awesome. I think it ended up getting shut down, unfortunately. But honestly, whoever had that idea was yeah. It's a pretty weird kind of genius, honestly.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because I was fascinated when you were saying about that woman with Down syndrome.
Yeah.
And like when she came forward like to be in the calendar, and it would, for me, it would raise interesting, like, not ethical questions, but just like, is this person, are they being forced, are they being coerced into doing it?
Yeah.
Are just people being voyeuristic? I mean,
Yep.
there's a whole range of topics there that are really hard to delve into, but sex is a really important thing for disabled people.
In some ways, I think there's an interesting conversation around the entire like voyeuristic and exploitative angle.
Yeah.
But in some ways, it does remind me. I mean, on the one hand, disabled people are rather inclined to get exploited. And I think this is just a general thing that, we can talk about a whole range of issues, from the fact that actually in both the US and in the UK, you can actually have a lower minimum wage as a disabled person than would be legal in any other if you were non-disabled. So that could effortlessly be argued as exploitation, So on the one hand, I think that but I also think, so having said that, I think that there is an element that as soon as you walk into kind of talking about voyeurism and exploitation, in some ways, that it's an argument that disabled people always seem to lose out in. I mean, on the one hand, you can argue that those things aren't good, but on the other hand, like, how come it always seems to be that disabled people can't make decisions on the chance that that this might happen, and like entire sections of life just seem to immediately disappear because two bad words might be associated with them, and especially around learning disabilities, there's an interesting topic on that for example, we had another American person, Dara Aldwin, on, and she was talking about how in care homes, one of the major scandals around them is the fact that you can't really have relationships in a care home.
Right.
And honestly, they might be exploited. That is one possibility. But honestly, if you have an entire swathe of people who just can't have relationships, that doesn't seem like a step forward, honestly.
No, it's awful. We have that here, and I work with the young adults that I work with for one of my leadership programs. Many of them live in group homes, and they have like a curfew, and they have set activities. And the young man that we were working with, like, was balking at that. And we hate the word higher functioning. I think he was on the autism spectrum. And that just, it wasn't it didn't seem a good fit for him. But that's just not, we have self-determination, advocacy skills that we teach in our leadership programs, and to help them make the decisions and learn those skills. We start at a young age too, and hopefully in high schools, to make your own choices and share your voice. And that's like the woman that you were saying with Down syndrome we had be in the show. She decided, it wasn't forced on her, and with the parent didn't bring her in, so we have some of the models, like the parents want them to do it, and they may have the cognitive disability, but that's not who we want. It can't be driven by the parent.
Yeah. But so often it is, because for various reasons. And going back to your leadership and advocacy roles, I just wondered while we had you here, I just wondered how much of that thinking gets updated through the actual people that you actually are teaching. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, how much of your leadership skills get updated through peer advocacy, as they call, through the people themselves. Does that make sense?
You mean, do I teach those skills in the leadership program? And
how often do you update those things through learning about people's daily experience as it is now?
Yeah, we update it always. Like we do the leadership. It's a 3-day intensive, and we do it twice a year with a cohort of adults 18 and over with across disability, so physical, sensory, intellectual. And it's interesting too, because I teach it and I have a co-facilitator, and he's on the autism spectrum. So we're the two leads. I'm the coordinator, I'm the director, but it's taught by people, designed by people with disabilities, which I think we're acting as role models around leadership and advocacy. And we're doing it with high school students now. And he helps me. He's my right-hand man. And we're a good match because he has the visible disability and I have the physical disability. So it's good. So I think we're really a good team. And we teach medical students. We teach our LEN trainees, which is a University Center of Excellence on Disabilities. So we wear a lot of hats, the day job work that I do. But it's interesting because you were asking me about the Bold Beauty Project, and I talk about it in my day job. And I talk about it to medical students. So they kind of break up those stereotypes and myths that people with disabilities are not sexual. And that's one of my biggest passions, is to break up those stereotypes and myths around sexuality and disability. So I use the Bold Beauty Project as a teaching tool to educate future healthcare professionals. And my bosses love that. My big boss is a pediatrician, and he's like, yeah, bring it in. You gotta start with that, because sexuality is a human experience. We all have those desires and wants and needs, but people with disabilities kind of get left out of that equation.
And
just to quickly say, Shabazz, I think we're reaching close to 12 o'clock, aren't we? So I think we make this
It's 11 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Well, we're reaching the end of an hour, I think. But anyway.
Yeah. But I'm just fascinated because I was wondering, like, I don't mean to call you old, but I was wondering how, when you're talking about sexuality and how ageism fits into that as well,
Ageism?
As we get older,
Yeah,
you know, I like we we go into a different category, you know,
yeah.
uh, and and not only do we have to deal with our bodies getting old, we have to deal with that whole thing of ageism around sexuality as well, you know.
That's a good. We don't really cover that much, but it's
Yeah,
I you made me think about that now because that changes things too.
yeah. I I'm I'm just saying it changes things for me, for example, you know, because I put my cards on the table. I hate getting old, you know, and I feel really old. So and how
It's-
that changes, mm, you know, my sexuality in that
yeah,
sense.
I
Not
agree,
only
Shabazz. Yeah, I totally agree. And the whole
not
dating
only
thing.
not only do you have to deal with it in the first place, you have to deal with it as an ongoing, evolving thing as well.
Mhm.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
I just, yeah, I just wanted to see whether you agreed because it was like that's something
I
that I
totally agree. And it's so interesting because, now we're all working from home, we're all, quarantined, and we've been figuring out how to pivot, with Bold Beauty because we have all these models from, 6 cities across the country. And so we've been gathering now through Zoom once a month. We've gotten a core group of women leaders. Some of them were models, some are not models, but they're interested in being models. So we brought them into the sphere and we've been meeting monthly. And that came up, the aging, because the women are to all different ages. Some are single, some are married, some I think two have children. And that came up, Shabazz, about aging and getting older. I mean, I'm in my 50s, but there's some in there in their 60s, having that discussion
yeah
because nobody really likes to talk about it.
yeah,
So,
but that's what I'm saying. They should talk about it, and that's why I was asking you because I thought I couldn't let this
yeah.
opportunity go to waste without asking you about it because it's just
Because
good to get.
that's you hit it on right on because that just came up like last month and we're meeting again next week. We meet monthly now through Zoom, figuring out what we're going to do. We're talking about like more like advocacy action. The political climate here is terrible right now. So we want to get more involved because we're not doing any shows right now with Bold Beauty. Everything's on hold. So how can we mobilize? We have a great group of women all across the United States
Oh,
that are doing cool things
yeah.
and we're figuring it out right now.
If everything was to go back to normal, where would you see Bold Beauty ideally in 5 years' time? If everything was to go back to normal.
I think just figuring out our like 5-year plan. We have a very small, we're a grassroots organization, so it's really a small team. But I think figuring out how to keep expanding, growing, and replicating in different cities. We have interest in some other cities, and we have an interest in New Jersey, New York area, going back to Washington, D.C. So there's other cities that are interested, but I think continuing continuing to evolve and replicate. Coming to the UK would be great.
Yeah, we'd have you. No
Yeah.
problem. Yeah. And is there anything you'd like to ask Pete before we wrap up?
I'm
How do
happy.
you, what is your day job? Like, this is a great podcast that you do.
Yeah, we just do. We don't really have day jobs at the moment.
Um,
We have we do a lot of advocacy, no
Yeah.
activism, and like various groups and panels and things,
Mhm.
and like I've studied film,
Oh, wow.
and Pete, I think Pete did psychology. Did that? Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, generally autistic activist, and so I work with a whole bunch of different organizations, and National Autistic Society, which is the national
Wow.
one.
Yeah.
I could list them off. It's
So you do a lot. You guys are involved.
yeah,
Yeah.
mostly Manchester. Honestly, more nationally as well through through various different networks. But yes, so yeah, disability stuff. I get paid.
How
for
did
some
you
of it.
guys meet?
Greater Manchester Coalition of Disabled People. It's the Manchester blah blah blah. You can probably imagine the rest, but basically honestly there's been an idea for a podcast floating around for a while, and there's been various discussions, and honestly basically we also know each other through DPAC, which is like a more direct action, as apart from like GMCDP, which is more like official. But basically, Shabazz came to me and was like, "Hey, do you want to do a podcast?" And honestly, then I was just like, "Yes." And various things and various moving parts were going. And at first, we were thinking about doing something with GMCP, and then especially with lockdown and everything like that, it was just like basically 90% of my stuff just stopped. It was a weird day when you just had like an entire day just like you're like 15 texts and it was just like, this is not happening, this is not happening, this is not happening. Yeah. And then it was just it was just like, let's make sure this happens.
Focus on
this. Oh my god, this is turning into an origin story. We're meant to be here talking to her, not about ourselves.
The question is, which of us is the hero?
You know, I'm a therapist, Shabazz. You know, I'm going to turn it around on you guys.
No, but it seems to me that I've been therapizing you during this interview.
Maybe we all need therapy.
Me. I think we all do. Therapy's not a bad word.
No. Is there any closing thing you would like to say, Shelly?
I think just I'm grateful for you inviting me to do this, and thank you for having me share my story and talk about a little bit about my world here in the Bold Beauty Project and my leadership programs. And I think I'm very grateful that you have this, and this is such an important vehicle and a tool to share positivity. And I think I'm just thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Open. Thank you for being so open.
You're welcome. And I hope we can stay in touch.
Yeah, if you want to stop recording now so we can have a conversation.